Let me stay here more. That's nice.
Sorry, I'll try to. I don't really need this, but this is sending our audio to our live stream. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Welcome to RAFMA and welcome to our second artist talk of the semester. Our discussion today is one of the programs related to our exhibition Through Their Eyes, selections from the Dorothy Ramon Learning Center. It is also part of our celebration of Native American Heritage Month here at CSUSB. My name is John Fleeman. I'm the assistant director here, and I had the great honor of working with our artists and the Dorothy Ramon Learning Center in organizing and curating this exhibition. I'd like to thank a few people. I was hoping that the Sivas would be here today, but hopefully they're joining us on our live stream. But the President and Vice President of the Dorothy Ramon Learning Center, Ernest and June Siva, I wanted to thank them so much for agreeing to do this exhibition and for sharing a pretty significant portion of their collection with us for a couple of months. I know I've been in their gathering hall, which used to have many great works of art by Gerald Clarke and other artists, and it's a bit spare, so I'm sure they're looking forward to getting those pieces back. I'd also like to thank one of the staff members at the DRLC, Pat Merkland, for sharing and promoting our exhibitions and programs here at RAFMA and sharing it with their community and members there. So thank you to Pat. Special thank you to two people who are CSUSB alumni and who really developed this exhibition from the beginning. One is with us tonight, Maria Munoz. So thank you, Maria, for everything that you've done to help make this happen. And Michael Chavez is not with us tonight, but hopefully he will join us on the YouTube stream. I would, sorry, I can't do this without notes and the huge font because I can't really see here. But as I said, we are live streaming this on via YouTube, and I'd like to welcome all of those who are joining us online. But before I introduce our speakers tonight, I would like to acknowledge and recognize that Cal State University San Bernardino sits on the territory and an ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians and the Yuhavatam. I was practicing that with Gerald earlier, and I think I probably messed it up, but we recognize that every member of the California State University and San Bernardino community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. So without further ado, we'll introduce our speakers. Our first speaker earned her BA in creative writing from UCR in 2022, so she's a rather recent grad. She is a Cahuilla writer, a bead artist, an activist, a cordage instructor, which I just learned what that was today. It looks really cool, and a traditional bird dancer. Her work has been featured in journals such as News from Native California, Pipe Wrench magazine, On Loan from the Cosmos. She is a two-time recipient of the UC Riverside Chancellor's Award for Poetry, a 2022 Pushcart Prize nominee, and winner of the Riverside County Bosworth Award for Activists of the Year. In her free time, she runs her own business, Cahuilla Woman Creations, performs her work at various events, and edits her literary journal, Rejected Lit magazine. She is also currently the 2022-23 Grayton Heyday Roundhouse intern. Please welcome Emily Clarke. You can come up here, Emily. Our second speaker, her father. This is the first time we've done a father-daughter talk here at RAFMA, so we're excited to see how this goes. He earned his BA in art from the University of Central Arkansas, his MA, MFA degrees in painting and sculpture from the Stephen F. Austin State University located in Texas. He's a visual artist, an educator, a tribal leader, and a cultural practitioner. He is currently professor of ethnic studies at the University of California, Riverside, where he teaches class in Native American art, history, and culture. He has exhibited his work extensively and has been featured in many exhibitions in many major museums. In 2007, he was awarded the Eiteljorg Museum Fellowship for Native American Fine Art. He served as artist in residence at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico in 2015. In 2020, the Palm Springs Art Museum hosted Falling Rock, his first major retrospective exhibition. And we actually have a catalog from that exhibition, which is really fantastic. So please take a look at that when you get a chance. He was awarded the Dorothy Ramon Learning Center's Dragonfly Award in 2022 for soaring achievements in saving Southern California's Native American cultures. Please welcome Mr. Gerald Clarke.
You know, introductions like that, I always expect someone respectable to walk in and come up on the stage. But thank you for being here. It's an honor to be able to speak about who you are, what you do. It's humbling, actually. So I appreciate each and every one of you who are here. It's also a special opportunity for me to be able to present alongside my daughter here as one of those proud fathers, and you'll see why in just a second. So Emily and I are going tonight, and we've developed this presentation, so we're going to be going back and forth between us. Before we get started, I do want to acknowledge the Serrano people, right, whose lands we're on. And I want to thank the university and the staff here for the invitation to come and speak to you. Happy to be part of the exhibit here in the museum. And really want to thank June and Ernest Siva. They've been longtime supporters of my work. And in that introduction, it sounds so impressive, but you got to understand this is like 30 years of doing things on my own dime, on my own time. Begging for shows and opportunities. So there's been a long investment of time and effort to get where I'm at today. And again, I'm humbled to be able to come and talk to you. And Emily and I are both enrolled citizens of the Cahuilla Band of Indians. And I live there in my family's traditional home there on the reservation, which is close 2 hours drive to down here, and depending on traffic. So that's kind of who we are. And so anytime I do an artist lecture, I'm not a huge fan of artist lectures, to be honest with you. It seems like they have this kind of format and this kind of same old story that's being told. But when I talk about my work, I'm really just talking about my life. And it's hard to divide the two. So anytime I do talk about my work, I always talk about where I'm from. And oftentimes I've been asked the question, do you make Native American art? And it's really all I can really do, right? And it's not that and we know what they're talking about, right? They're talking about certain colors, certain designs, certain materials or what have you. But that's not what I see, and that's not what I do. The Native American aspect of my work and my practice is the lens that I see through, right? It's how I perceive the world. That's what makes my work Native. And I've gone through various kind of phases in my career. Again, 30 years doing this thing. And early on, I just wanted to be an artist who happened to be Native. And then after, I got my degrees and I met other Native artists, I was like, wow, we do have some things in common across this nation, right? And I was like, so I started kind of thinking of myself as a Native artist. And then more recently, as I got older, I began to realize that perspective is really particular to a Southern California Cahuilla way of looking at the world. And so when I talk about my work, I often show where I'm from. And we've just survived COVID, and that was harsh, and my community lost members to COVID. But it was also kind of a blessing because it forced me to slow down. And I've been spending time with my 87-year-old aunt. And so this photo was taken this past summer from her back porch. And there's an image of the Reds, right? This is where we're from. Those little black spots are some of our cows out in the field. And I live just to the left of the photograph there. But this is how I see the world, and it shapes the things I think about and how I perceive, society. It's all formed in this connection to the land is very important. And like with a lot of Native people, it's really hard to divide Native people from the land. Now, before I moved, my dad passed away in 2003, and before I moved back to the reservation, I was teaching at a regional university in Oklahoma. And some of my students there, and actually Emily and her sister were both born at an Indian hospital there in Oklahoma. But some of my students out there were Seminole students. The Seminole are from Florida, who were moved out of Florida 1,000 miles or more and taken out of their homelands and into Indian territory, which ends up becoming, right, the state of Oklahoma. And I have to say that I'm very thankful that we're in our homelands, right? And I just want to point out the little divots you see in the stones here. This is not far, this is off the reservation, but it's not far from the reservation. Those are those mortar holes. So they say at the time of contact, 70% of all natives here in California ate acorn on a daily basis. I just cooked our traditional acorn dish for my class this week, actually, so they could actually experience that. That's one of our traditional foods. So, for me, history is not a chapter in a book. It's not a class that you take one semester. It's like living, and it surrounds me, and it's part of my environment, part of my life. And so, for lack of a better way of saying it, these rocks are hard as a rock. They're granite. And so you're talking like this hole right here, there's generations of people that went into creating that. Here you see a little bit shallower one. And so as you walk around, and there's also like a natural spring nearby. So I know where these kind of old village sites are, and it connects me to the land, and it gives me a sense of belonging. And so unlike my students in Oklahoma, right, this is where we belong, right? We're in our homelands, and that's that connection. And so history is our land, it's our stories, right? And it's these objects. So right near that same spot, I can just find pottery shards on the ground. No telling how old they are or whatever. I never take them. And this is what connects me. It gives me that sense of belonging. And so here's a kind of a map, an old map of Cahuilla lands. And you can see they stretch out to the Chocolate Mountains, Salton Sea area, and around what we call Riverside County today, right? But I'm very thankful that even though I live on the reservation, it's about 20,000 acres, it's a small sliver of our traditional homelands, but we are still at least in our traditional homelands. So my reservation is right around this area right there on the map. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Emily.
Miahui Naneteo, Emily Clarke, Pinnahin Kuyanga. Hi, I'm very happy to be here with you all. So we've done a couple of land acknowledgements today, and I have a poem that is sort of my version of a land acknowledgement because I feel that oftentimes they leave out a big chunk of the story, and they often serve the non-Native community more than they serve the Native community. And so this is kind of my way of beginning my portion of sharing and bringing that back to a Cahuilla identity. So it's called This Poem is Taking Place on Stolen Land. You arrive slick like oil and spill yourselves over these mountains you claim are God-given. Privilege is born in this pristine wilderness, and you tear into it with fangs, starved for power you cannot carry. God whispers sweet nothings into your ear, and you get paid for a bloodied pair of hours. I have made this land just for you. You say these California rivers run gold as you bend to rinse your hands of digger blood in the gentle splash. You divide what's left of us onto shrinking soil and pluck acorns and yucca blossoms from our fists. We are sun-dried gills, rising and falling. Somehow, Thomas still rises, teaching us that broken and bloodied jaws don't get the worm, will never get the worm, are the worm. We are the sinners, the conquered, the pests of our own land. We are damned and displaced, destined to mourn the land our beating hearts were molded from. But we survived your savagery. Like white sage, we regrow in these valleys, tending to earth's wounds. We are poppies unbloomed, eagle wings open. You cut our tongues, but still we sing, praying for grasses no longer remembered. Okay, I'm gonna go back. Thank you.
Yeah, proud father. And so, we thought we would start with talking about our belonging to this land and to this landscape because it's very important to us. Uh, and so we're moving into another idea that we wanted to talk about, which was identity. And identity, I don't think historically was overly important. We knew where we belonged. Everyone belonged to some community. More and more today, we're talking about identity in terms of individuals or what have you. But I always try to be very honest with how I present myself. And so I want you to know that my dad was Native and my mom was a white woman. Her family moved to the Hemet area here in Southern California during the Dust Bowl age from the Panhandle there in Texas. And they met, fell in love, and me and my sister were born. But I always try to present myself not just as, a Native person, but as a mixed race person, right? Like so many people are today. And so, I've always found I've got to be able to take my personal life and incorporate it into the art. So this is a wall sculpture. And so there I am in the middle, and then the white version of me representing my mom's side of the family, and then the red version of me representing my dad's side of the family. And you take equal amounts of red and white, and you get what? Yeah, I'm not pink, right? And you see how we've dumbed down ethnicity, we've dumbed down identity. And so that's the problem with color theory, right? And I will tell you that I'm actually not half. My dad's parents met at Sherman Indian School in Riverside. My grandmother was Cahuilla. My grandfather was Wallapai from Peach Springs, Arizona. And somewhere way back in his lineage, there was a German immigrant. That's why we have the name Clarke with the E at the end. And so the Bureau of Indian Affairs actually considers me 3/8. That's my blood quantum according to the federal government. And I can tell you that everyone I've ever met that's non-native, when they find out I'm not full-blooded or not even half, they go, oh. And so I go through life like meeting people who are disappointed in me, right? Yeah, I want you to imagine what that feels like, right? And I told my class earlier today, actually, that, I don't mind the Bureau of Indian Affairs considering me 3/8 degree of Indian blood, had I'd only experienced 3/8 of the poverty. If I'd only experienced 3/8 of the domestic violence that I witnessed as a child, 3/8 of the hunger that we went to bed, you understand? And so these kinds of things like blood quantum, right, are so insufficient to represent who we are as a Native people. And so, I do my best to kind of be honest with people about these things. The other thing is I grew up as a cowboy on the reservation. So I come from a long line of Indian cowboys. The picture there on the left, that's my dad and my grandfather back in the 70s. They're wearing cowboy hats, boots, and they got pistols on their sides. There's my dad in the center. This was not long before he passed away. And then there's me on the right, 5, 6 years old. They've already got me on the tractor. And so, I remember going to school and a lot of my friends were non-natives and they considered like Indians and cowboys as being like opposites, right? And I never could understand why they thought that because I saw it all as one thing. And I'm certainly not, saying I was a very intelligent child, but even then I realized that stereotypes and categories didn't really fit reality very well. And so this is part of our cattle herd, and I'm a rancher today. Thanks to global warming, right, climate change, our herd is over the last 30 years has dwindled down from 150. Now we're like at 38, just because of there's less for them to eat or what have you. And so, as John mentioned in my introduction, I am a former tribal leader. I was elected to tribal council for 2 different terms. And oftentimes when you're a tribal leader, you're always fighting the county, the state, the federal government, fighting for your tribal sovereignty, the inherent tribal sovereignty that tribes have in this country today. There's always challenges to that, right? And I take that same concept and I bring it into what I do as an artist and who I am as a person. And I talk about sovereign identity. So when I say I'm an Indian cowboy, why most people, right, see me from mainstream America as you have to be one or the other, I don't accept that. I am who I am, and I take that sovereign ability, right? That sovereign identity, and I claim it as my own. And as a mixed race person, I've heard this from other people saying, it's like you live in two worlds, right? And I'm so envious of those people because I feel like I live in about 15 worlds. Tonight I'm an artist, right? I'm a father. Earlier today I was professor. I was chasing cows yesterday, so that made me a ranch. You understand? We all play so many roles, right? That we tend to simplify and dumb down, I think. And I don't like that. We have to take the sovereignty back, and we are who we are, right? In spite of people being disappointed when they hear I'm not full-blooded. So I mentioned that I think my art is best when I pull it from my own, experiences and such. And so way back 2002, by the way, I went to welding school at high school because I was told I was too dumb for college. What they really meant was I was too brown and too poor, right? But I did end up, after welding school, going to college. And that's been valuable to me as an artist. And so I started welding up branding irons like you see here. So this is a branding iron, it's oversized, with the word Indian on it. And I made it as a sculpture. And again, I don't claim to be very smart, but it's like 2 years after I made that branding iron, I'm laying in bed and it just occurred to me and I went, huh. And so I got the idea and I heated up that branding iron and then I soaked some watercolor paper and I burned the image into the paper. And so taking my daily life, my existence, right, on the cattle ranch, right? And why did I choose that word Indian? Well, it's this idea of the distinguishing collector. Again, people asking me, do you do Indian art, right? And it's this idea of being categorized, these stereotypes, these categories that try to block in who I am as an artist, right? And if I'm talking about sovereignty, right, identity, but also creative sovereignty that I'm expressing here. And so you want to brand me as an Indian artist, well, here's the brand. And so I made it as a form of a sculpture.
Yeah, so we thought this next piece would be a good addition because we are talking about identity and stereotypes. And what this poem is really a rejection of the stereotypical Native identity that is often inflicted onto Native populations. And I do want to note that this poem isn't just about Native identity, but about specifically Cahuilla identity, and I guess our Cahuilla identity, and just my experience growing up on the reservation and seeing how these harmful stereotypes affect our people. It's called Reservation Required. In your version, we are baby mamas. In your version, we are Disney Pocahontas. In your version, we are panhandling on the corner of spirituality and alcoholism. We keep at least one long loaded shotgun in every plateless car. In your version, we are not brown enough and we are not white enough. Our voices are replaced with the mechanical cha-chings of neon slot machines. In your version, we are Kmart Halloween costumes. A plastic Coachella trend atop the sunburned heads in which we have never once been given a second thought. We are the minority of minorities and the tokens of academia whose names do not live on any professor's quick-to-dismiss tongue. But I don't want to be your Edward Curtis photograph. I don't want my name in your history books. Don't want to be just another museum specimen, a body forgotten like my ancestors' regimen. So in my version, we are dancers. We exist somewhere between tradition and resilience. In my version, we are the hummingbirds on your porch. We are the acorns that decorate the forest floor. In my version, we are laughter echoing off the mountainside like the rhythmic crash of gourd rattles, as familiar as ocean waves.
Wow. It's hard for me to listen to those. I've never had anybody like be able to, words are not my medium, right? So I've never had somebody that I put into words what I've thought or felt, it's really a powerful thing. So speaking of identity and history, and I wanted to talk a bit about the weight of history because, the old saying that ignorance is bliss, and there's an element of truth to that because the history here in California with Native peoples is especially tragic if you know that history. And knowing that history, it puts a weight on you, right? And it's not an academic thing. It's not, again, it's not a chapter in a book. It follows you through life, and you experience some things that hit you maybe deeper. When I teach a class in California Indian history, and there are times when I'm talking about the genocide that happened here in California that I warn my students, this might trigger you, right? But what I don't tell them is it's triggering me the whole time, because it's not statistics that we're talking about. It's not specific laws, right? This is family. These are human beings that we're talking about, and relatives. And it's especially hard to be able to talk about these things. And this is the weight that I carry into the studio. Oftentimes when I mentioned I'm not a huge fan of artist lectures, oftentimes there's a discussion of self-expression, right? Things like that. And when you know the weight of this history, I feel ridiculous into making the focus of my work simply self-expression. You know, oftentimes when I do artist lectures, I talk about obligation. I talk about responsibility. And I don't think I need to focus on self-expression at all. I think we're all just naturally self-expressive beings. And so I don't think about that, but I carry that weight, and I have that weight impact me and affect me in what I do. So here's a couple more of those branding iron prints. And so I put that whole branding iron thing away back in 2004. And then in 2006, when I saw all the political and social turmoil in this country, right, I returned to it because I saw a lot of social violence that was happening in this country. And it's a violent process, I have to tell you. It's a lot of fun too, by the way, to do these things. But I'm not a violent person, but I thought that these prints, I'm calling them prints, I felt like these represented the violence that I was seeing. And so oftentimes I'll use that term amnesia to talk about this country and its history. And I'm very pleased with my college students. I like that they get angry when I teach them about our history here. And they're angry that, why didn't we know this? How come we had to go to college to learn this, right? And indeed, none of us are as good looking as our social media profile picture, right? Neither is this country. And that's what we've been sold, was this kind of glamour shot of this country's history. And so I often talk about the amnesia, right? And so this print here on the left, this is two different branding irons. So I have one that says amnesia. I have a whole separate one that it's the shape of the United States. And you can see where it's actually burned through. And my favorite aspect of these prints are this totally unpredictable kind of heat things that shoot out from the paper, because I want to show that volatility of the history and the violence of the history. And I will tell you, I'll put on some heavy duty rock music in my studio, and I'll heat up these irons, and I'll do about 50 in an afternoon. And sometimes the iron's too hot and the thing just bursts into flames. Sometimes it's not quite hot enough and I don't get a really good image. So I may do 50, and then I'll choose 3, maybe 4 of different configurations that I'll sign, and then I'll frame. And then also in 2016, all the anti-immigrant sentiments that I saw in this country and in the media and social media. And I found it interesting that nobody was talking to Indian people about this anti-immigration sentiment. And we were talking to ourselves about this. Oh, now it's bad if you're an immigrant, right? And so I felt it was important for Native artists to start expressing these ideas, right? And reminding America, right? I thought we were a nation of immigrants. I thought that was the story that we were being sold. And so here's another one of those. I will tell you, initially, I didn't like it when the branding iron was so hot and it burned all the way through. But then I had this idea, and so I started mounting photographs behind. So these are historic photographs. So this is the children that were at Carlisle Indian School. So burned through the image of this. And if you know about the boarding school situation, this continues. Canada is coming to terms with their history. We're still waiting for the United States to come to terms with its history of the incarceration of children in these boarding schools. Another related thing I've been doing in the studio is, so, a lot of times when we talk about artists, we talk about talent, right? And I was born with a specific talent. When I wear expensive clothes, I can make them look cheap. I don't know what it is. It's just natural, right? Other than that, everything else is hard work. Everything is practice and everything is hard work, right? one of the things I do have the ability to is I see things for what they are, but I see things for what they could be, right? So I was like at Staples or something, and they had this little kit, and it was make your own rubber stamps for like stamping like your self-addressed stamped envelopes and stuff. And I was like, well, that's cool. I didn't know that existed. How can I use it in my art practice? So what I did was this, and this was done in Vermont during a residency I was on, and I pasted I taped a piece of paper up on the wall, and then I got a projector like we're using here, and I took a Google map of the United States, and it recorded in this map, it was a special map that showed where all the English settled in this country from the 1700s through the early 1900s. And wherever it said, and I made a stamp that said England with all these little letters. And so I stamped everywhere where that map said the English settled. Then I did Germany, then I did Italy, then I did, I just kept Poland, right? Just kept Russia, right? And I kept doing that. And I did this over a 6-hour period. And then I turned on the lights, and the country just kind of reveals itself. And you can see where like all the metropolitan areas were and where people settled. It was very interesting. I will point out that over to the side here is a little note that I did not include forced immigration. So I didn't include those people who were through human trafficking were brought here from Africa, right, as slave labor. Okay, so I make a point to do that. But you'll notice the title, The United States of Amnesia, right? And again, it's this idea, we forget this history. So I made this right in the middle of all this anti-immigration sentiment. Obviously a self-portrait also made around the same time. And again, everything you see there is words, right? Using the rubber stamp. And you understand, you stamp it on the ink pad and you stamp it on the paper and it's really dark. But without going back to the ink pad, you get a little lighter, a little lighter. That's like a gray scale, right? It's perfect for like representing stuff. And so here's an image. You can see the detail. You can start to see some of the text there. But what I did is I did a portrait using all the names of the 6 top most prescribed depression meds in America in 2016. Okay, so why did I do that? Well, you remember the weight of the history? If I focused on everything that Indian people have lost over the last 5 centuries, if I focus on all the things that the Cahuilla people have lost over the last 5 centuries, right? I think I would fall into a depression I would never recover from, right? And so that's what this piece is about. Now, I tell my students that I try to focus on the miracle. I think Emily and I are miracles, right? We're miracle. Indian people today are miracles because we're still here. We survived genocide. It's like the ultimate success story in a lot of ways. And so I try to stay positive, but this is all about that weight that I feel as I walk into the studio.
So before I read this one, I want to give just a small trigger warning for mentions of violence as well as religious aspects. And so what this is a retelling and kind of a compartmentalizing of the mission system here within California. And I'm not going to say too much more about it because I think if I succeeded as a poet, then hopefully you'll start to feel this weight that we're talking about in this discussion. So it's called Call It Sacred. Ocean air sucked through the teeth of silenced mouths, blood and human seeping into church floors, these houses of worship built by inhuman heathens. I smell Indian palms wet with sores as they mold adobe into bricks. I hear cat o' nine tails beating scar gardens into Indian backs. My people fall onto purpled knees, begging forgiveness from a God they've never met. The sick escape and travel miles just to die on land once called home. The pregnant abort themselves, call it survival, call it sacred. I see the priests, celibate fathers fathering the unborn, communion cracker and a sip of wine to swallow. Is God here inside these walls? Call it sacred, my people's bones. Thank you.
I've done my best to shield my kids, right, from these historic traumas, right? But it's there. They grew up on the res. And so, I often, again, try to be honest with people. I have the potential of being at least a third generation alcoholic, the men in my family, and that intergenerational trauma that goes back to the mission system, right, and colonization and such. And I've done my best to shield them, but they see it. They grew up on the res. They see it. They understand it. And, you just try to do your best to kind of limit, right, as it goes on through generations. The other thing we want to talk about, this weight, right, and identity, is we're California Indians, and there's a very special kind of history here. And again, this one of these branding iron prints, so the native and then the shape of California. But this is who we are as people, and we have a unique story, I think. We share some things with tribes from other places, but there's something special to California. We mentioned earlier, or Emily mentioned the gold rush, I think, earlier. Look on your driver's license, right? There's a white gold miner on the background of your driver's license if you have a California driver's license. And yet, the gold rush, if it had happened in Southern California, we wouldn't be here today, right? It was devastating for those peoples. And that's that amnesia that we don't talk about, or we leave out of our discussions. How many of you know about Ishi? Do you guys know Ishi? Well, there's a couple hands, right? Considered the last wild Indian that was found here in California. There's a little bit, he's the last of the Yahi people. By the way, his real name wasn't Ishi. In the Yahi tradition, you were named by your community. You didn't name yourself, it was by your community. And he was the last of his people. There was no one left to name him. And so Ishi was actually just their word for man. And this is one of the most tragic stories, not just in California Indian history, but American and even world history. And he was found, his entire community had been wiped out due to colonization, genocide, and the gold rush. And he was found actually in Oroville, California. And I went to the site actually last summer, drove up to the site, and this is the historic monument that was placed at where he was found. He was found starving behind a slaughterhouse. And they didn't know what to do. They called the sheriff. The sheriff showed up. The sheriff didn't know what to do. And so they actually called Alfred Kroeber, who is an early anthropologist, famous here in California. In fact, UC Berkeley's anthropology department, the building was named Kroeber Hall until recently. And they became friends, and I'll do quotes, air quotes, friends. And Ishi ended up living in the Phoebe Hearst Museum the rest of his life as almost like a living specimen, a living artifact in the museum. And the anthropologist used him as an informant to learn about the ways of California Indians or what have you. And he got sick, I believe it's tuberculosis, and he passes away. And Alfred Kroeber, claiming to be his friend, he asked Alfred Kroeber, no autopsy, that goes against our belief systems. And apparently Kroeber, they say, agreed. After he passed away, there was an autopsy. In fact, they sent Ishi's brain to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. So these are the stories that we know as California Indians that impacts us, that's part of our history. And my good friend, James Luna, if you're familiar with his work, Emily and I, our families were friends. We'd go over and have barbecues and stuff. And he was an amazing, internationally known artist. And James and I got together years ago, and he told me about this idea of doing a whole series of works about Ishi and about this story that's so important. And I have to say, I was apprehensive. We all understand cultural appropriation. And even though we're California Indians, the idea of taking someone's life and turning it into an artwork, I was uneasy with that. And then when I saw what James did, I felt really good about it. It just blew my mind. And so he did a photo series. So there's James on the right and then a picture of Ishi on the left. The title there, "You Go, I Stay," was one of the last words that Ishi said before he passed away. And so, and you see James passed away in 2018, tragically. Really a blow to the art world, to the California native art world. He's really amazing person. And so I wanted to pay honor and homage to both James and Ishi as an artist. And so I developed this work, which is called Becoming Luna, Becoming Ishi. And let's see if we can do this here. Oh, can't stop it. So what I did was I made a karaoke track of the actual performance of James becoming Ishi. And so these, you see the kind of how the text is highlighted. And so the delays in the way that the language is said, right, the words are said, exactly match what James did in the performance of Ishi. And so my idea is to have this in a museum, on a monitor, maybe cover the walls with information about Ishi's life, about James's life, and then actually have a couple of footprints on the floor where the viewer can come and stand there. And this is just a small snippet. I think the whole thing is about 8 minutes. But this is a performance artwork, but the performer will be the viewer who comes. And, you know, we have that saying, walking in someone else's shoes. I want you to say those words. I want you to feel those words, right? Going through there. And so that idea, you would be becoming Luna, becoming Ishi.
So in this poem, I put Luna and Ishi in conversation with one another, and that's where the title comes from. So Ishi was called the last wild Indian in California, and Luna was, I don't know who called him this, but he was once called the most dangerous Indian alive. And it does include a line that refers to when the people who were studying Ishi and basically holding him captive, they showed him this airplane and they were super excited for his response. And then all he said was, "Is there a white man up there?" And they were all disappointed, but I love that. So I had to write about it. So the last wild Indian in California and the most dangerous Indian alive walk into a bar. Or maybe it is just a museum. Maybe it is just the barrel of a gun in which they are the last 2 bullets. They sit. One of them, it doesn't matter which one, opens a newspaper found on the table. The other man orders a drink, something alcoholic that he sips slowly. The men sit side by side, not on bar stools, but on the same cushion of a booth in the back. The first man shrugs and pulls from his bag a picture album. They flip through it together, pointing and making small comments when a photograph interests them. There are many pictures of the first man shirtless and holding a bow and arrow. There are many pictures of the second man dressed in over-the-top regalia or laying in a glass box. The last page of the album has only 2 pictures. One of the first man lying on an autopsy table, his brain lying next to his opened skull. The 2 men point at it, the brain, and one of them accidentally knocks over the glass of alcohol. The other picture is of the second man, or perhaps it is only of his casket. The second man does not look at his own picture, but rather watches the first man inspect it. Then the first man points upwards, towards heaven or something else entirely. White man up there? The second man shrugs, make a noise like, and they go.
Now, I do notice you're clapping for her, but not for me, so I'm just going to point that out. 2016, Emily and I, we went up to the Dakota Access Pipeline protest up in North Dakota. And it was cold, can you tell? And so we went up there, the picture on the right, that's me standing next to the Standing Rock. And there's Emily, who is participating in a march. And why did we go up there? I went up there because I wanted to know the truth. Social media was posting things left and right. There were photos or videos, but I don't trust social media. And so we went up there, and one of the things I came away with was just the messiness of humanity. You know, for every person that was peacefully protesting, there was someone who just wanted to rumble with some cops, right? And at the same time, I will say I've never felt that kind of oppression. There were constantly drones and helicopters flying overhead. At some point, we had these laser things. I hope it was from cameras, not from anything else. I mean, it was really a bizarre experience. And oftentimes, I think, you know, this is that obligation, that responsibility to culture and community or what have you. And it's a responsibility, again, that I think we have. And so each of us made artworks from that experience. This is the artwork that I made from the experience. And there you have, it's entitled Leaks. And so you see the big pipe cutting through the gallery walls there. You notice I called it Empire Partners Unlimited. And I put these like stormtroopers across the top representing the law enforcement that we encountered while we was there. Again, really amazing feeling when you have that oppression on you. And then all those electrical cords, it's no accident that they're black, coming from the bottom of the pipe there. It's like they're leaking, right? And they're extra long because I wanted to emphasize those piles or puddles of cords. And at the end of those cords are headphones. And what I did is I interviewed people and I heard their stories, because it was an isolated place up there in North Dakota and cold and such. But it was the stories that got out through social media and that kind of woke people up to what was going on up there. And I think I have a detail of the stormtroopers. Why stormtroopers? Why was I making this kind of Star Wars connection? Well, it's interesting to me how these superhero movies and these space age movies, it's always like really easy to identify the good people from the bad people. And America loves these kind of movies. And yet, when it came to this kind of situation, people didn't know who was right. You know, some people just back law enforcement because they think law enforcement represents the government and truth, right, and safety. But that's not what I saw, right? And so I'd like to, you know, I'm commenting on this kind of idea, this Hollywood, right, that everything's so easy, black and white, good and bad. And what I saw there, I saw everything that I was there, and it really changed my attitude, right, about you know, how this country tends to kind of criminalize, right, this idea of protest, right, this idea of standing up for one's rights, challenging the status quo. And so this is part of my Native American jewelry collection. In response to that feeling, right, is the incarceration rates of Native people, and yet combined with this kind of desirability of Native jewelry. It's a, you know, multi-million-dollar industry. So you want the jewelry. America wants the jewelry. They just don't want to deal with our issues that we're trying to portray. And so I'm not a beadwork artist. Emily's a beadwork artist, and she made this this medallion for me. But in this work, I actually partnered with Bridget Pulskamp, who's a beadwork artist, Dene beadwork artist in Orange County. And we did a series of these handcuffs, these beaded handcuffs, in a way to kind of examine these incarceration rates, but also, you know, pretty it up with these this desirability of Native American jewelry. Hey! Thank you, John.
So this is the artwork that I created after our trip to Standing Rock. And it was written not only in response to the protests and the things that my dad mentioned that we saw, but just also as a sort of tribute to the tribal people who were fighting the pipeline. Earthlings. Pure mother, draped in shades of billowing flora, so lavishly dirty. Home longs to be a soft, rounded edge. She yawns and we suck her breath into our greedy mouths, claiming it as our own. Her skin is clay. It echoes with the slap of our bare feet on hard ground, crumbling apart with each step we take. Our mother's veins are silver, violent rivers. We slurp and dribble, lapping at her blood to survive. Blood is human currency. We love to watch it clot. It dwells inside centuries of memory. A woman post-labor kisses her baby, blood clinging to her proud mama mouth and smudging her child's skin like watercolor. Coyote cleans the thick, bloody fur of her mate with a gentle pink slobber until he is pure and healing. A boy gazes at his reflection, red rusty gushes from his nose, the result of his attempt to protect a little sister. He holds his head high. Blood clots at the edges of travel stop bathrooms. The plastic shell of a tampon rests lifeless at the bottom of a trash can. Womanhood leaves stains. Our bodies are handfuls of clay, pinched from the organs of our mother, her heart, her lungs, her uterus. Layers of her rippled skin fade from green to brown. Her scars are paths for us to walk. Cruelty is human currency. We love to watch ourselves topple like dominoes. Our sacred mother is hemorrhaging. Thick black poison has flowed inside her rushing veins and created a corrupted bloodstream. We have left her in ruins with steel and plastic. We have sliced open her skin time after time and allowed greed to consume her. Mother, teach us to respect. Teach us to grow. Teach us the power of our bare hands. Teach us to protect a home. We have forgotten how to cherish. We have forgotten how to cushion. Teach us to heal you. Teach us to heal ourselves. We must learn to bandage our past without discarding it. Mother's breath has slowed. Her blood has been poisoned with oil, the black snake. Forgiveness is human currency. We love to watch our colorful glass cups overflow with water. It is ice cold in our throats.
We've been talking about some pretty heavy stuff, I know, right? And so we wanted to end in some more kind of positive areas. So this is a work that I created for the Palm Springs Art Museum, part of my retrospective that we had right before COVID in 2020. And the Cahuilla people, as are many California tribes, historically, our art form that was most known was basketry. And basketry tended to be, at least with the Cahuilla, a gendered art. So it was a women's art, and not that it was less than a man's, right? It wasn't a hierarchy. It was part of the spectrum of expression, right? And so I want to make, I'm an artist, I'm not a basket maker, but I wanted to make sculpture that kind of paid homage to our basketry tradition. And so what you're seeing here is actually made out of over 1,800 crushed aluminum cans, and they're all epoxied down into the shape of a basket. It's a satellite dish, and it's mounted to the wall. And I've used different colors of the cans to create the patterns that you see here. And I was actually given access to Palm Springs Art Museum's basket collection. And so the designs that you see are our traditional designs that come from two of their baskets. So I combined the designs there. And they're both, it's no accident that they're out of aluminum cans. They're both beer cans as well as soda cans. So why would I do that? Well, they're contemporary, they're found objects, they're familiar. I find a lot of Americans are afraid of contemporary art. And so if you show them something that they're familiar with, they'll at least engage with it. It kind of disarms the viewer a little bit. But I mentioned that I have a potential of being at least a third generation alcoholic in my family. And so it's part of my community. It's part of the issues that we face today. And it has to be in there, right? The soda cans, diabetes. It's not just an issue in Native culture, Native communities, but it's affected me personally in my family's history. My grandmother passed away at an early age because of diabetes, from sugar, right, from processed foods. And so the fact that there's alcohol involved with the work, with the beer cans or the soda cans and sugar, it has to be in there. The United States, mainstream America has romanticized our cultures, right? And I never want to be accused of doing that to my own community, right? And so it's in there. These negative things are in there. But you know, when you get back and you look at it, the whole thing is, it's kind of a beautiful thing. And anytime I show these in a museum, I want people to see them from about 70 or 80 feet away. And then you just see the patterns and you see the colors and it kind of glitters under the light. It's only when you get up close, you're like, oh, that's just cans, right? And I like what happens in that, right? But it's taking those issues, right? But it's still, the community is a beautiful thing. You've all, you know, I talk to my students about reservation porn. Now, don't Google that. You'll be shocked at what you find, right? But what I'm talking about is the poverty porn, right, that we see, right, that we see over and over again in the media, right, of reservations being these desolate places of poverty, of alcoholism, drug abuse. And there's an element of truth to that, but there's no other place I would want to be There's no other place. And when I get home, I feel great. I feel like I belong there. I'm home, right? And so it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing that we're still here and that we're celebrating. Emily and I and her sister, we're going to be singing and dancing Saturday as part of a cultural event on our reservation. It's a beautiful thing. So this is my newest work. I just completed it in LA just a couple weeks ago. This is the largest can basket I've ever done. It's 10 feet wide, 7 feet tall, and it's at the Facebook offices there in LA. And this is a really neat opportunity for me because it brought together my painting with the mural that we've done on the background. It brought together the rattle paintings that I do, like that's across the museum there in the gallery. So I have the rattle paintings, and then I have the can basket. So it was a great opportunity for me to take these different things that I do and bring it all together. And I wanted the young, computer coders to see this on the way to their workstations when they're doing whatever they happen to be doing, to remind them again to overcome that amnesia that we're here, right? We're part of society. And as far as the design goes, someone asked me if this was a traditional design. It's not a traditional design. I thought because it's outside of our community, it needed to be something else. So it's a design of my own making. But the whole time I was thinking about networks, Native communities, we have kinship. We're talking to each other, right? We have these connections and kinship. And so the designs there, by the way, that's Pepsi Zero has black cans. I know all the colors of cans now, right? 805 beer is black cans, so I know all these things. The white or the silver is Coors Light, Diet Coke. I mean, and if you go to a mini mart, there's a whole palette of colors in those coolers now. And so again, disarming the people with using everyday things. So there's some details. This was just finished just a couple weeks ago. And I want to also acknowledge my other daughter, Lily, helped me paint the rattles. She's very good. I'm getting older. My eyesight's not as good for details, and I can count on her. She's 19, and she really can get in there and get some good details. So the rattles were actually painted onto plywood and then coated with resin. So they have a really nice look, a really rich look connected to the walls. There you see the colors of the cans there, and then me working on the mural. This is me in my studio. So when I make these can baskets, I have to make them flat, but you have to get away from it to see the pattern. So there I am up on the scaffold trying to see the patterns and adjusting cans here or there so that the pattern makes sense and is visible. And I want to point out that my studio there is on the res, right? And it's really important that I'm part of my community, right? And before I had my studio, I'd just work in the yard and people would drive by and their kids would be like hanging out the windows. What is he up to now? And I love that. I love that, right? That the kids might say, oh, maybe I could be an artist. But it's really important. I think I could have been more successful had I moved to Santa Fe or some other place, right? I can't do it, right? Because nobody's making art for my community except for me, I think. Right? We're the forgotten people back in the hills of Riverside County, right? And so just a week ago, Emily and I and her sister, we were out there with our families lighting candles for All Saints, which is kind of maybe 30% of our community is Catholic, right? But the rest of us, we've indigenized it, and we make it a community event, and we're out there and we're part of our community. It's hugely important to keep that because here in California, we have the gold rush, right? Mining the gold out of the hills, right? But that didn't stop, right? Today, I see academics mining our communities. They want our stories, they want our songs, they want our histories, right? And then those things don't come back to the community. And so it's really important for me to be making art within my community. Good.
And this is going to be the last one that I share tonight. And it's about the cemetery that you just saw in the previous slide. And I always like to end here because it brings it back to home and it brings it back to where we come from and our people. It's called Cemetery. These graves, marked by mustard weed and ant hills, are homes to the lizards and stink bugs, breeding grounds for the rattlers and kangaroo rats. There is a wooden cross buried into every other mound, 2 cedar limbs tied together with twine from that morning's hay bale, The dew on the dead daisies, sticky and sweet, like the burnt honey sun setting behind the marble cross that casts tall shadows onto the dark hill of graves. These are our ancestors, fogging up the night with their sacred songs. These are our ancestors, living beneath our bare feet, glancing up, only sometimes, to see the cemetery fill with people holding melted candles, blackened vases, and each other's hands. Thank you.
I can't tell you how hard it is for me to hear those. You know, really, really good. Okay, so with that, Achma Peepachim Call. It's good that we've gathered here, right, to share this moment. Humbled, appreciate your presence here and supporting what Emily and I do. And with that, John, we can hand that catalog around if we want.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
then we thought we would open it up. Anybody has any questions or comments?
Yeah, well, thank you both so much. That was wonderful. Let's hear it for them. Thank you, guys. We do have a few minutes for some questions, so I'm hoping that you guys have some questions for our panel here for Gerald and Emily. And as we said, we had this great catalog. I'll pass this around if y'all want to take a look at that. Do we have any questions for our artists today?
So we did an
Well,
amazing job, and there are no
you
questions.
you have left no doubt. I have a question for y'all. You know, you're reacting and to the world around you and combining these things that you experience and feel with the traditions in the moment and the future and all of these different elements. And I know your work. I've worked with you outside of here as well. I've seen some of the installations that Gerald has done, and you're using about every medium I can imagine. Painting and sculpting and using different materials. Can you talk a little bit about your process? Like, is there a medium that drives you in a direction of making a piece, or does it start out with this idea, reaction to whatever you're experiencing, and some of the things that you used as an example tonight that drives the medium in the process?
Yeah, so I will say the art world, I disagree with the art world. They've been trying to turn us into philosophers, but if we're philosophers, then we never make anything. We just think about it, right? And my favorite thing about making art is the physicality of making the art. I get psychological relief from being busy. We're using my hands and things like that. That being said, I don't draw. People are surprised by that. When I get an idea for a work, I make lists. And so whatever the concept might be, I make a list of how would that be best expressed? Photography, performance, sculpture, painting, what have you. And then I go through, okay, so what colors maybe best represent that? What textures, what materials? And I just start making lists, and then I start connecting these different things. So, when I was in graduate school, I was told I was going to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. That's not the whole quote, right? But that's what I was told. And I never accepted that. And I always felt like I didn't make art when I was in school. I prepared myself for a lifetime of making art. And so I did all kinds of stuff. And when I had my retrospective, I always believed it would come together, no matter how all the different things that I use. And I think I was right.
Thank you. Have you two collaborated, or any ideas of collaborating on a piece?
Have we? I don't think so. But actually sitting here just now, suffering is human currency. Was that what you said? And I was sitting there thinking, what would that look like? I will say too, as far as like cultural appropriation, our Cahuilla creation story is amazing. And there's such wonderful visuals there, but those visuals are not for you. And so I'm very careful not to culturally appropriate from my own culture. And I think we don't think about cultural appropriation that way. It's always outsiders, right? But even within the culture, we should talk about that more. Some things aren't meant to be shown just openly. And so I'm very careful about that. But I think this is a wonderful opportunity. It's hard for me to hear her poetry because it's so emotional for me to hear somebody actually say what I'm thinking, feeling.
Yeah. I'm not sure how you get through reading it. It's tough to hear.
Yeah.
I think did we have a question
yeah.
on, oh, Kathy Gray. Can you speak into this so the YouTubers can get the question?
Hello, YouTubers. And this kind of just relates to what you just said. I just was wondering if you critique each other's work.
Not out loud.
Well, I will say, like I said earlier, words are not my medium, and that's why I'm so impressed. No, I will tell you, some of her when she recites her work, I'll be sitting like down there, right? Going to her various readings, whatever, and I'm like, oh my God, did she just say that? It's very strong, and I don't have that in me, and we do kind of bounce stuff back and forth a little bit. What do you think about this or whatever? And we're probably going to be doing that more and more. This is only our third time we figured out talking together, and I really love it. I really love it.
Well, we do have a question from somebody joining us online, but I
cool.
cannot read it from the phone that Diego just put in. So
Can
my
Diego?
eyesight's not good enough to read that small. So I'm going to have Diego with his young eyes read that for us.
We do have a couple questions from YouTube. The first one's from Pat Merkland. They ask if you could please talk a little bit more about the patterns and the colors chosen for the rattles in the latest artwork.
Oh, so let me go back here. Yeah, so oftentimes, sometimes, not so much this, but sometimes I have a show and people hear that there's a native artist that's having a show, and then they see beer cans and they see, I do gumball machines, I've done, branding irons, and they're like all confused, like, where's the Indian stuff, right? But a lot of times my art, like, even if it's like contemporary stuff, people don't understand, like, our creation story starts with certain colors. And so a lot of times I put those colors in the artwork. There's a painting across the way there that I did the same thing, but people don't know that, right? And so sometimes my work suffers because they're thinking in terms of these generic pan-Indian ideas and not specifically to who we are, right? And so they assume that I don't know what I'm doing when in fact it's in there. They just don't know our history and our culture. So yeah, the colors are chosen, the designs. Sometimes it's man, that looks cool. Let's do that, right? But sometimes it's very much tied to a specific goal of trying to represent a certain element, or like I said, the creation story, stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. We have one more. C. Decate. He says Gerald uses CDs in his music rattle art piece found in the museum. I think he's talking about the rattle blanket at the end of the hallway. Is this to tie in the musicality concept, or does it hold a different meaning to you?
So one of the things that people don't understand that I believe in art is that an artist can make something that can turn around and teach the artist something, right? So when people assume we know everything about our own work, but sometimes I'll put something on the wall and then someone will say, well, I see this, or I feel this, or I'm thinking this, and I'll look and I'll be like, oh yeah, I see that too now, right? I'm learning from my own work, right? A lot of times I stick CDs on the painting, like across the hallway there, for two reasons. First of all, I don't want someone looking at my work and saying, is that 1870? It's because America likes to assume that we're from the 19th or 17th, 18th century, right? We're seen as historical people. This past summer, I was in a group art show of native artists from California. We showed at the La Jolla Historical Society, and the NPR station came and interviewed us, and it was very nice. And I'm always humbled to be able to share my work. But I did pose the question: why are we here and not down the street in the Contemporary Art Museum? We're all alive here, right? And so because we're seen through these historic lenses, right? And so I'll stick a CD in there, or I'll stick a beer can in there just to remind people, no, this is contemporary art, right? The other reason I do CDs or DVDs is because when you turn them around, that iridescent quality of the backside, that looks just like abalone shell to me, like a contemporary abalone shell. And so if you look at that painting, there's both abalone shell and DVDs. And so I'm trying to make connections between the past and the present.
Looks like that's all we have.
Well, I think that's it for today. Oh, by the way, Gerald, nobody uses CDs anymore. So,
I'm old.
as I'm told.
I'm old. I know.
Well, thank you both again. That was fantastic. And thank you all for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all again for coming. It's always
And
humbling.
please, if you haven't had a chance to check out the exhibition or the rest of our exhibition, please do so. We'll stay open a little bit later. Robert, I know you want to see the exhibit, so. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
Mike.